to the Brandon and Joe podcast, and actually our first podcast after graduation, starting our new schedule. So we're excited to be here. Our guest today is Allyns Melendez. She received her MBA from Temple University, is the Chief Operating Officer of Quinn, and is currently the CEO and founder of HR Transform. Welcome, Allyns. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We are very excited that you're our first guest in our new schedule, trying out some new stuff. So this should be a fun episode, especially with all your experience. Like I know we're talking mostly about HR transformed, but I don't know, just like your whole entire resume on LinkedIn is stacked. So there's so much cool things to talk about.
Yeah, I'm excited.
No, we'll do some cool things. Before we even get started, I know we heard you talk about or talk at Disrupt HR. Is that like a regular thing you do at like certain type of events, like these public speaking keynote type things?
Yeah, I started doing that more in the past year, but before that, I was doing a lot of speaking at universities, really in the communications department mostly, and sharing HR insight and how to get a job. And so I'm kind of used to this public speaking thing.
That's good. I feel like it's always good to have a seasoned pro to teach Joe and I some new tricks when they come on here. So we definitely are looking forward to it. And you did a great job at Disrupt HR. I remember you and I got to chat for a brief 10 minutes afterwards, and hence how we were able to get you to come on here. So I feel like you have so much like valuable experience as Joe spoke to. And to kind of get us kicked off here to start talking about like HR Transformed, like what kind of led you to starting that firm, and could you kind of give our audience a brief idea of what HR Transformed is?
Yeah, so HR Transformed is an HR services company. We do three things. We provide HR outsourcing the company, so we become their HR department. So that's things like benefits and payroll and onboarding and offboarding and recruiting and employee relations and performance reviews and all that good stuff that the way that people interact with organizations, we sort of handle for companies. We also do coaching and we do training as well. So we're a full HR services company. And so what led me to start the firm, I have 27 years in HR. I started in 1997. I had no idea what it was. HR was on my like high school schedule. It was homeroom. So when I was first told like, so do you know anything about HR? I'm like, you mean homeroom? They're like, no, HR. I was like, what is it? Human resources. I'm like, well, what is it? She was like, you know everybody's secrets. I'm like, ooh, that sounds great. So HR became something of a love for me. I had the really fortunate experience of working under the most amazing people at Guardian Life Insurance, which is a really big company that gives you benefits and 401k, and they're large. And I was one of like 90 something people in the HR department. So I got to float around and I got to learn the ropes on HR. And throughout the years, I created goals for myself. And that was something that I learned early on. So in high school, I went to a business high school in New York City, and I went to John Jay College. And I always had goals. And I had a goal that by the time I was 50, I would own an HR company and work with companies around the world. And I'm not 50 yet. I'm not that close, but I'm pretty close. I'm in my 40s. But I am really excited because I am so close to that goal and I'm doing that goal, most of that goal right now. So in the past couple years after I finished my MBA, I got the confidence to get in front of business owners and talk about HR in a way that was comfortable, that would be able to sell to them, and that would allow me to do what I love to do every single day. So that is what really led me to start this firm a couple years ago. Was I just wanted to do HR as my full-time job and not just overseeing HR. I just wanted to get back to my roots and just do that every single day. And then what better way to create an HR company? I'd be able to do that with a great team of people.
No, that's really awesome. I feel like showing how beneficial HR can be for certain companies, especially I feel like not a lot of people know that. And you brought up that you went to a business high school, which is cool. It's something I haven't heard about before. Did you take like HR specific classes in either MBA or the business high school, and that's kind of like what led to your interest?
So in high school, I was in a program called Secretarial Studies. Again, I'm like aging myself. So 1997, 1995 or so to about 1998 when I was in high school, I um, I took these courses and I learned how to type on a typewriter. Like totally not what people do anymore. type on a typewriter and do stenography, which was shorthand, because the goal was for me to be a secretary because there were no computers in offices. And then when I joined Guardian, like computers in offices and HR, that program, secretarial studies at Murray Bertram High School, transformed into an HR studies major. So eventually they did convert it to HR when the secretarial studies major was just no longer needed because everybody didn't need secretaries in the way that they did. So it became part of what we learned, but I didn't necessarily know I would go into HR. But a lot of us did end up going into HR that took that.
You know, it's funny. Like at my high school in Las Vegas, we had it's called like a CTA school, like a career and technical academy, and they had a few of them across Vegas, and they all had like unique disciplines you could do. One of them was business. I was actually in engineering because that was what I thought I wanted to do. And it's so cool because I feel like it does help you learn a lot of tools like early on in your career. Because even though like I didn't end up obviously going into engineering, like I did learn something that I didn't want to do, which I think is just as valuable. Otherwise, I would have wasted time in college to pick that up. So I feel like to have that experience, Allyns, in high school is probably really awesome for you. A
It
question that
was.
I was just thinking of, like based off of your what led you down your path of HR, you said Guardians, right, was where you started. Um,
Right.
when you were there, like how valuable would you say it is to start your career somewhere that's like a larger company, a larger scale company to like kind of gain knowledge and experience versus like starting somewhere smaller? Like, do you think there's pros and cons to both? Like, what's kind of your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to be in a larger company because I was able to hop around. I could concentrate on employee relations. I could concentrate on recruitment. I'd spend time with the training department, and then I started doing orientation. I was able to visit with the compensation department, with the payroll department, and understand what they do. And even though I wasn't specializing in each of those areas, I was still able to talk with and interact with people that's what their job was. So the larger firms give you that. You can really focus on one or two areas of HR and live in that space if that's what you love. Like some people are super analytical. They do better in compensation benefits and payroll departments. And some people are more like people oriented, bigger picture. And that's where your employee relations or some of that work comes in, or the training and development place goes in because you like getting in front of people, you like making them feel good. And then the smaller company, I had joined Quinn, which was the smallest company that I had ever joined. It was like 25 people. I was like, wow, I've only been in places where it's like 100 plus. And here I am at this really small PR firm, but it was PR. So it was like really exciting. They were doing fun work, lots of amazing brands. And I was able to do everything. And at that point, I had so much experience in all these different places that I was able to bring it all together and build an HR department from scratch. So, in my particular experience, starting big and then going small, I was so well prepared from all these mentors I had and all these sort of safety nets. Like, I could make a mistake and I had people there watching and learning. Whereas if you start in a smaller company, you get to do it all. There might not be a safety net for you. You have to get it right. There's no one there to say this is not correct. Or if you're directly reporting into an owner of a company who doesn't know how to do HR, they're counting on you. So if you're a great self-starter, that's awesome. There's a lot of homework to be done to make sure that compliance stuff is done right. You're hiring, firing people. You know the risks involved there? Like there's a lot. You're training managers. Managers take on a huge risk and liability for people. Um, and there's a lot of insight HR has to give to that process. So we're kind of like the keepers of all things compliant and legal.
No, it makes, and I agree too that like especially coming out right from school, if you get to work at like such a big company, and taking on sort of I guess either a generalist or a specialist role, you get all those different avenues and all that experience. So that, as you said, when you move to a smaller company, you have that experience and knowledge to be able to be like, oh, I can handle some things
Exactly.
on my own. I want to speak to that generalist specialist that you brought up. Do you find like a way that people can understand what you think they would like better? Because you brought up like some people are more analytical and some people are more people sided, but sometimes it's hard to choose when you're like going for jobs. Like, what do you think I would really like? Do you have any like perspective on that?
I do. So I'm a behavioral analyst of two different systems, and I'm also a flow coach. So I do a lot of work with people's sort of behaviors and the types of work that they like to do. And when you take someone who, like I said, is very analytical, very sort of attentive to details, when you put them in front of people to interact and be on, right? Like show up, kind of like an improv. Like I just have to kind of wing it. There's a lot of energy that it expends for them. And if you have to do what you don't like to do all day, every day, you may not be happy long term in that role. So when you're in HR and you're dealing with like very complex people problems, maybe you like to just be more analytical and not have conversations with people. So then you can become a specialist in sort of the analytical side of HR. When you are someone, and I'm more that person, I love employee relations, I love complex problems, I love analyzing the data and looking at it. I don't like gathering the data and having to scrub the numbers. I'll do it if I have to, but I'm more about like, what does this tell me? How can I create a big picture from here, and what kind of tactics can we bring on so people, one, feel good about their jobs, or there's data for them to kind of like, create what their future looks like, or have really difficult or deep conversations with each other, like managers saying, I just don't think you're doing a good job. I'm like, well, that's not enough. People need more than that. But that's the big picture talking. I don't think you're doing a great job. Okay, great. Now do a better job, and I'm leaving now. That's that big picture manager. You can't just do that, right? You have to kind of think about, what does this employee need? Are they an analytical person? Now they need specific examples or specific steps on how to succeed. Whereas someone else is like, all right, you just lit the fire. I'll just do it. I got it. I'll figure it out. You've got to know who your team members are, what their behavioral kind of makeup is, and then also as a leader, understand your own leadership style and how you show up. Because the way that I lead isn't the way that my team may need to be led. The way I like to be led isn't necessarily the way that I should be leading everyone else, just because that's the way that I feel most comfortable in. And that's where managers sort of start to fall over themselves. It's like, well, I like to just be told to do it. I like getting that fire under my toes. And when they do that to other people, they're left kind of like standing there saying, I don't know what to do next. Can you help me? And they're like, well, I don't get that deep. You just have to figure it out. That's the thing that we really need to be careful of. And HR, again, is that place where people can go to and saying, I don't understand my manager, or a manager saying, I don't understand my employee. And we're there to bridge the gap to say, this is what they need. They're not hearing you because you're not speaking their language, whether it's analytical, whether it's big picture, whether you're not empathetic enough and you use words that may attack them. If I said to you, Joe, if I said, you're not great at your job, as opposed to saying the expectations of the job are not being met, I have taken you into a defensive place on that first one by saying you, to a non-defensive place where I'm talking objectively about the job.
I like the second
So
one better, much better. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So what I do a lot is coach managers in understanding like, this is how you need to show up. I know it's a lot of work to think through in a better, more objective way, because all you want to say is like, you're messing up with your job. That just shuts the other person down. As soon as you hear that, you're like, okay, I'm done. In my head, I've checked out, or I'm shutting down, or I'm going to get angry. And managers sometimes get afraid of like, well, what if they get angry? What am I going to say? All the responses that come from people, they're easy. And sometimes like, oh, I could totally give them the message. They're not performing, they're not doing their job, and then I'm going to walk away. No, it's a two-way conversation. You can't be shy. If you're going to give this information, someone's going to feel like they're not doing their job. You need to sit with them and make sure that they understand. Like you're in it for something. And good intentions always. Don't insert authority. Like it's not important to just be like the one who's in charge in the room. This is about your responsibility in growing and developing other people. You want to work for someone who's in it for you, right? You don't want to work for someone who's in it for themselves. So if I'm there to just be like, I'm the boss and I say what to do, how's that encouraging you? But if I said to you, I'm on your team, Brandon, I'm on your team. I want to see you succeed. Here's how I see you need to move forward. What are your challenges with that? How can I help you with that? And it's really important to use words that we call them calibrated questions. What can I do to help you? How can I support you even more? As opposed to saying, Joe, why didn't you do that on deadline? Why weren't you there on time? When I ask why questions, that puts you on the defense again. When I say you things, it puts you on the defense as well. But when I ask you those calibrated questions, they're collaborative questions. So then you don't shut down.
I love all of that. I think if I had to pick one theme that I heard is just HR wears so many hats. And
Yes.
being in HR, you're responsible for more than just the general job description, because you kind of spoke to some of the coaching that you do, which I do want to dive into that in a second. But I think that's so valuable as someone in HR to have skills that are not necessarily written in a job description, that can help you, like in a time when you're dealing with an executive who might have a certain perspective or agenda that they're trying to meet, and you have to try and find a way to meet them in the middle of like the company and the other side of it. One thing you said in the very beginning, but it piqued my interest, and I just wanted to ask. You mentioned that you're also a flow coach. So Joe and I have talked about the topic of flow on this podcast many times. As IO psychologists love flow state and flow theory. What exactly does it entail being a flow coach? Like, what do you do in your day to day as a flow coach for somebody? Like, what would that even look like?
So I took courses with the Flow Research Collective, and I absolutely adore everyone there, Steve Kotler and everyone who's there, especially my coach, John Beal. He was incredible, so I shout him out. Being a flow coach for the business owners that I work with and integrating flow with behavioral work that I do with them and sort of this understanding their own emotions and how to interpret them is that you go from being just mediocre manager into this like incredible human being. So, how do I show up not tired and like sort of rested and ready to go? I feed my mind with oxygen. I make sure that I'm allowing the perfect environment for me to get into flow state to maximize my output because as a business owner, I don't have all the time in the day. As a mom, I don't have all the time in the day. As a human being, I want to make space to recover from work. So being a flow coach is really understanding how do I become the most amazing support for the people that I work with as a leader of this company? What tactics and things do I put in place? Do I allow myself to get distracted? How do I go from the struggle phase right into being super focused? And then how am I recovering? I like to cycle, I like to rock climb, I like to get outside and allow oxygen to come into my body. What am I also putting in? Am I drinking enough water? Am I taking vitamins or whatever it is that you do? I'm not a nutritionist or any of that. I do what works for me with my people that I work with. But what are you doing specifically in the day to create an environment for yourself where you can succeed and you can be dangerous in what you do? Like just you as a working professional, we're athletes from a different perspective. We are mental athletes, and our mind will surpass our body in most cases. Um, how do we keep that running? How do we keep ourselves creating output from our jobs? So if somebody needs me to be on 24/7, like I speak all day, I'm in meetings all day. I love it. Some people get absolutely exhausted. If I ask that person who gets absolutely exhausted to do that for 12 hours and never recover, I'm not doing my part in coaching them in flow because they're not getting a chance to recover actively from their work in however it does fit for them. Stephen Kotler, who's the one of the co-founders of Flow Research Collective, he wrote a book for people who are aging because obviously I mentioned my age earlier. I'm in my 40s. People over a certain age, like you start to break down, right? Your body breaks down, earlier than that, but we have to do our part to stay mental athletes for a really long time. But it also means physically we need to create that perspective for ourselves and create oxygen again, eating right, sleeping right, drinking enough water, and focusing when you need to focus and eliminating those distractions. So when I work with the business owners, kind of going back to it, we do a little bit of everything in our coaching sessions because I want them to understand that it's not just your behavior. It's what you put in your body. It's what you do with your time. It's endless scrolling at night. What purpose does it serve you? It's eliminating distractions because you're running a business or you really want to be amazing at your job and valuable. And so, in order to do that, there's a lot of discipline involved. So, I think that I'm motivating enough for people when I chat with them on like, here's what you need to do. Here's how you're going to do it. Let's find a way that it works for you. There's success there. And I love to see my business owners just feel like, wow, I can breathe a little bit, Allyns. Thank you.
You kind of already answered my question, but what you're saying is that you incorporate non-work, I guess, related things such as like well-being at home or like getting like fit or like what you put in your body, which is interesting because I feel like it's something we haven't really talked a lot about on this podcast, but how much of it has a big effect on your I guess your life in general, but like as you in the workplace, are these like elements that you talk about at HR Transformed, or like that you talk with clients that I guess your well being outside of work?
We do. We encourage our clients when we talk to them to have a wellness committee, and we'll run the committee for them. It's just part of the services. Sometimes they opt not to do that because it's not as important as like compliance and getting payroll and benefits right. But we have wellness initiatives that we do, whether they be virtual or non virtual. We do virtual walks. Sometimes my team and I will either do our meetings on the Peloton. I've done that with one of my team members. Like we have Peloton desks. And so when we're
Oh,
doing
sick.
our company
That's
meetings,
awesome.
we have our laptops on our Peloton desks and we're like doing a ride for 30 minutes together and like sweating out of breath, but like totally doing it. Me and one of my other team members, I go out for a walk on FaceTime. If we don't need to share screen, because that's like important, right? I'll go out for a walk in my neighborhood and she'll go out for a walk with in her neighborhood. We'll do that. But it is all about what you do, and work life integration is really important. And sometimes it's out of balance, especially for business owners. I think they're notoriously the ones where it's like, I do not have time. I'm one of those people. There are moments in my life where I have no time even to eat. And what do you end up doing? You end up grabbing whatever your kids brought in from the supermarket, which is like a bag of chips or something. It's not good for you. And then you don't feel great afterwards. So creating a system for yourself, and this is all about in flow, like, I use Factor, or I have HelloFresh bring food to my house, and I can still cook for my kids, but I don't have to worry about like that one piece of garlic that I forgot from the supermarket because it's in the bag. If you create this system for yourself, you will have a better work life integration. And it tips the scales. Like I love to work. So I typically will work more than I will work on my life. That works for me now. But I recognize that I won't have that luxury later on, especially if my body starts to break down sooner than I want it to. Got to stay on top of that. So discipline, a schedule, and adhering to it. Because sometimes we just ignore the pop ups, right? You see the pop up of like, this is focus time. It's like, I don't feel like focusing right now. Sometimes when you time box, it just doesn't work out. But maybe in the morning you wake up and you think, you know what? I'm not feeling focused. I'm going to go for a walk or a bike ride. And when you come back, it's like take the shower and then you're just like, whoo, I'm in it. Now I feel focused and now I can do it. And sometimes you don't have the luxury of doing that. I noticed I used to do Alexa. I used to do the Jeopardy questions. I can't say it out loud because if anybody's listening, she's going to start talking.
I know you.
So
I
if
got you.
you have one of those, I used to do the Jeopardy chat. I used to say, let's play Jeopardy. And she'd ask the 6 questions of the day. And I've got to tell you, there were times on days where I didn't drink enough water or I didn't get enough sleep the night before, I'd get like 0 out of 6 questions right. And on the days where I like had enough water, or I exercised that morning, or I made time for myself, or I had a good lunch, or I got a good night's sleep, I had like 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6, rarely 6 out of 6, but I would get up there with the Jeopardy questions. And I was like, isn't this fascinating that I tracked how I was taking care of myself and how I was balancing my personal life and my work life? And I saw it in Jeopardy questions. So it was fascinating to me that while I was tracking that, there was a way for me to measure how good I was. And now I do it with Wordle because like, wow.
It's a good idea in the morning to do like the word games, like strands. I know is one. It kind of gets your mind moving.
And sometimes I put Wordle on at like 1 a.m. Like if it's ever a late night, whether I'm coming back from an event or I'm still working or I just can't go to sleep. And I'm like, oh, it's after 12. Let me try Wordle. I like bomb, like
Every
all of
time.
it.
Every time.
And then I'm like, you know what? Let me stop here. And I get to like the fourth one and I wake up the next morning and I'm like, oh, I know what this is.
Yeah.
Like it's so important to listen to your mind and your body because they both take cues from each other.
It's so true, and we've spoken about mindfulness a few times on this podcast, and we've had a few guests on here speak about it. I remember Joe. We went to that People Tank event for benefits with Jim, and that one was in the city, and they were speaking about all the different benefits that these HR executives were speaking about all the different benefits they have for their employees, and I was actually like so surprised by how many had benefits that were external to the company, like I specifically remember one. They had a subscription service to a company I can't remember, but it signs them up for like a bunch of different wellness companies. Like it can give them gym memberships. It can sign them up with like personal fitness, like all these different things. I just feel like that's so important, and I think I'm noticing at least more conversations in that space from an HR perspective. Is that something that you've been seeing too, Allyns, where we're having more conversations about the wellness of employees and what they need to do outside of their working hours to keep themselves good?
Having been in HR for 27 years, that conversation has absolutely shifted into more about employee wellness and their mental state and their physical state than ever before. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think that and it's always existed, people sort of breaking down, being burnt out, or having, neurodiversity in the workplace. That's always have, that's always been in the workplace. It's just now we're talking about it. Now we're having conversations about it. Some people feel uncomfortable about it, especially a workforce that's older. They're just like, we never talked about it. We just sucked it up and just came to work anyway. But now we're having those conversations. So there's a lot that companies are doing to really help employees balance all of that and get the assistance that they need. And since we are in such a different stage, social media plays a part, especially if you even work for an agency versus an in house position. Your hours might be just everywhere. And it's a lot, it can be a lot of stress on you. So companies that offer that, it's amazing that they can offer that. And I think the one challenge is getting people to actually use it. So you could say, like, my company does this app and my company pays my gym membership, but are you going to the gym? Because I work with a lot of companies where it's like they offer all these benefits and the employees feel like they don't have the time to use them. So that's a conversation that needs to happen. Are you using them? Are you getting to the gym? Are we creating an environment where we're making money, obviously, because that's the way we get to pay you, but you also have the time and the energy to go to the gym after work or before work? Like, we can't just say that we're doing it. We have to embody it. We have to make sure people are utilizing it. Otherwise, it's a waste of money.
No, it makes sense. Like, there's no point in providing something if no one uses it. Then, like, who gets the benefit?
Right. And that's why it's important to look at usage. It's important to do engagement surveys every year, like what's working, what's not working, because you can find out that you've been spending so much money on this one thing that no one's using because they prefer something else that maybe could be cheaper or just more valuable. So we got to listen to your employees, because this is the age where the kind of the scales have tipped a little bit. Whereas someone used to just tell you what to do and you got to be okay with it. Now it's like, what does everybody want and how can we provide that for them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like maybe there's another app that they would like better, and then people would start using it. That makes total sense. And I know we asked you probably a lot of off the cuff questions, so I'm going to try to bring it back to HR Transformed. Um, One of the questions that we wanted to ask you is that a lot of people coming out of grad school and school in general want to start their own firms. So, from someone from your position that's been doing well so far, do you have any advice to them on like kind of how to get that started?
Yeah, I think passion is a big part of it, honestly. I love HR. Like I have shirts upstairs that say I love HR. I should have worn one today. You could see it. I absolutely found my niche. I found the place that makes me feel valuable, that I understand really well, and that I don't want to stop learning about. And I'm not a serial entrepreneur. This is my first, sort of like jump into the entrepreneurial world. But I've always had that mindset, according to my teachers back in the day. So passion is a big one, because if you don't wake up every morning thinking about, do I love to do this? Then you may not have the energy long term to grow it. Some people want to just start a business to make money and then sell it. So you also have to decide, am I one of those people that just wants to make money, turn companies over, and then talk to people? So have the passion, but also start to build your network. Out of grad school, get to know people. Find them on LinkedIn. It's seriously not that difficult to just connect with someone and say, I think what you're doing at your job is really cool, and I just want to have a conversation with you. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for anything other than, like, this is something I want to do. And I just want to pick your brain about how you got there. People love talking about themselves. They love it. Reach out to them and ask them all the questions that can help you in your career. You never know, you might be offered a job just so that you can get more experience before you go out on your own, or you just go out on your own. There's a lot of compliance stuff in there too. So, like, make friends with lawyers, go to those free webinars, anything free online, go to them if it does fuel your passion for wanting to build a business, because it's not easy to hire people, to let them go, to bring on benefits. Every state has different rules. I mean, take it from the person who does this every single day. You don't need to do that. You can hire me to do it, but you need to know what you're getting involved with, because you didn't just, like, start your business to manage people all day. You start your business to do the things that you love. So the passion needs to be there, the network needs to be there. And at the end of the day, what are you in it for? Like, what's in it for you? For me, it's, I mean, like, seriously, obviously got to make money. I got bills to pay and more kids to put through college. I got two more to put through college. One is already done. But the thing that you need to wake up and say is, is this something that's fueling me? I don't want to press snooze in the morning. I'll do it maybe once or twice when I have late nights, but I don't want to press snooze in the morning. What's going to get you to not press snooze in the morning?
That's absolutely great. I think, it's really interesting because there is a level of, like, I love that you use the word passion in terms of like starting your own company and going on your own and trying to go into consulting, because sometimes like you do think about it for the money and you're like, oh, okay, like if I go external, I can do consulting, I can make good money. I remember this quote from New Girl, like a TV show, and like one of the characters, Nick, is like talking about someone who has a ton of money. He's like, yeah, it's some scam called consulting. And it's like, that was always like the first thing that came into my mind when I didn't know what consulting was, and now I'm in it and speaking to other people who are in it, and I'm like, okay, no, this is legit. But it definitely, passion to me sounds like something that's super valuable for people who want to go on their own and start their own firm. To keep us on track of the questions we want to ask you, we wanted to make sure we also asked about like the resources that you utilize since starting your own firm and going into HR Transformed. So with that, like, do you still utilize resources that you had, whether that was at your business high school or in your MBA program that you finished? Like, are you still utilizing those resources that you learned from back then, or is a lot of what you use now what you've picked up on the job from like your learnings over the last few years?
It's a combination of both for sure. So the things that I'm not passionate about, you know, all those other things beyond HR that I had to do, I use them all, specifically finance. And I graduated with honors, but finance and accounting were probably the hardest ones. Accounting
Oh
more
yeah.
so because I was like, which account is this? A credit or a debit account? Like, why do I need to remember? Those resources, like understanding how QuickBooks works or just even how the accounts work, I go back to my MBA stuff. Like I literally have some of my textbooks behind me in my bookshelf because I don't remember those. They're very hard to keep up with. So the things that I wasn't so passionate about that I need to know to run my business or to be able to review a P&L or be able to negotiate a deal with a client or a potential client, all things I fell back on. I specifically talked about this the other day on the soccer field. Literally like on Saturday, someone was talking to me about my MBA and they were talking about how interesting our negotiation class was. And he did his MBA somewhere else and I did my MBA at Temple. And I just remember that I had to play a role of a 50 something year old Asian man in China. And like my daughter was taking over the company and I was meeting with the US. And I had to play this character. And I thought, boy, not only did I have to like live in this skin, I had to understand business from this person's perspective. I'm a female, I'm Hispanic, I'm a US citizen, right? Like I grew up here, I was born here, like so different than the mindset of a Chinese native doing business with the US, and then they all show up and they're handing me like M&Ms and like it was just so funny how the cultural aspect of things. And I go back to those moments because when it's time to negotiate my clients, like I love people. I wish I could do this for free. Like literally, if I had all the money in the world, I would still do this because I love it so much. But I'm like, I have to negotiate. And that makes me feel really bad asking for money sometimes. But I've gotten really good at it thanks to my Temple University degree. So I go back to that. But the HR stuff and like the operations and the IT, that absolutely for me were things that I had really learned more about on the job because there are people driven issues. Like number issues, super easy to figure out, textbooks, all these tools are there to help you. The people led issues are the ones that are really just incredible because no one situation is the same. No one person is the same. No one company is the same. So, a complex IT issue or a complex, um, like internet doesn't really work very well. Technology sometimes just has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
People have a mind of their own. That part I had to really learn on the job because of how variable it was. It wasn't something static that I can pull from a book.
That's a really cool project you got to
Yeah.
do. I mean, Brandon and I can attest we've had nothing like that, something similar of like presenting to clients in classes and getting those people skills and presenting skills. that you feel like you can draw back on when you're like, oh, now I have to present that work. And like, I remember what I did in org psych, and I can use the same aspects. So that idea of being able to pull from that is cool. And I'm glad that you were able to give us some examples. But then I also like how you're like, oh, there's some facts that I just have to grab from a textbook if they're numbers, and just things that you should just generally know.
All the fake
Um,
companies we built, Joe, over our 2 years at Hofstra, all the fake consulting companies that we were the chief people officer.
I think half of them are called like Brando and Joe. We kind of just used the podcast name to take it over. Uh,
Easy.
I feel like, well, you did just give us some great piece of advice, but to finish off our recording, I wanted to ask you if you had any general advice for graduate students or students or just early practitioners getting into the work world for their first time.
So I'm going to give them something they probably not ever heard before, which is build your own board of directors. Never heard that before.
It's a
So
new
that's
one.
something that I picked up actually a couple years ago. And it is about, and I teach this when I go back to Temple University and I talk about, women and leadership and empowerment for them specifically, but this is for all genders and all of that. Build your own board of directors. Have a group of people that are not paid, that are not paid, that are people that can be mentors to you, people that can be very honest with you, people that can tell you the truths that you may not want to hear and the truths that you're willing to hear. And I have used these folks as advisors over the years on like, should I start my own business? Should I take this deal? Should I hire this person? So I have a group of people, no more than 4 or 5, honestly, of people that I would just check in on, all in different walks of their life, but all very successful people that are willing to be those sort of mentors to me. And I call them my P PBOD, my personal board of directors. And that is my advice. Like, it doesn't need to be a formal thing. You don't need to bring them into a boardroom somewhere and have meetings with them or create minutes that you send to them. It's so archaic. It is just in your head, like, who are my board of directors? Who do I trust to tell me about me? Who do I trust to give me advice on how to move forward here? That network is absolutely the most important thing because a lot of people will hire you first from word of mouth. They're not just going to click on an advertisement for someone who doesn't know you. And my board of directors have introduced me to my own clients that I have now way before I'd started doing any marketing for my firm. Any. So it was great to be like, oh, you have an HR problem? Talk to Allyns. And that's how I would get most of my business in the beginning. So that board of directors and networking with people and they see that you trust them and you take their advice really to heart, that creates such a big network for you. So absolutely, personal board of directors.
I love that. And I think it's like a nice anecdote for people coming out of graduate school or who are still in graduate school that it doesn't really, the board of directors that you want to create can come from a lot of different places because like I like how you said mentorship, but also people who will be a straight shooter to you. Like for, like I know Joe and I have built a very strong connection working on this podcast together. Like he's somebody I would lean on, but it's not like we have any different level of seniority, but we both like could look at each other and ask each other the tough questions that we would be able to answer for each other, just as someone who we could see as a mentor for us who might have a few more years of experience also be considered part of that board. So I like that perspective that you offer where it's not just about what the people are doing but like how they can interact with you, and
Yeah.
that's a very valuable perspective that a lot of people should definitely take note of. I don't think, I think that is the first time we've had that on here, Joe. Oh, wouldn't you agree?
That's the first time I've heard of it, but it makes total sense. I love that. The personal, what do you say, the PBOD.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that in my notes. But no, it
If
makes
you
sense.
if you wanted to be really dramatic with your personal board of directors, you bring somebody on that did not like working with you.
Ooh.
Imagine that. I have not done
That,
that.
that might take a couple of years to,
Because they would be the ones that would give you like the deepest part of change for you. And then always have someone on there in whatever capacity that is a change agent for you, someone who can help you change something. And again, like I don't ever say don't change who you are, shift into in the moment when you need to be, right? Like, so if I have to be diplomatic one moment, or, I have to use like super amounts of empathy or sympathy in one moment, like I'm shifting, and sometimes I may not be my natural state, but I need to be that person for someone else. And so have people on your team that can help you with that kind of change.
it's great advice. Yeah, if we all need people we can trust and draw back on.
Yeah.
Like Brandon said, it's the reason this podcast is still going.
Yeah,
But
100%.
thank you, Eileen. It was an amazing discussion. I'm excited for people to hear, especially about HR Transformed. And we'll link everything in the description for those listening to so you guys can check it out for yourself.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this was absolutely great, and I do want to add too, Eileen's like the timing of this was perfect too for Joe and I to get you on here and to talk about all the work that you're doing, and at the exact same time we had just finished and we're just graduating, so we're adjusting our show and how we're doing it a little bit, so we get to dive a little bit more into some details we might not have been able to. So we thought you definitely provided a lot of awesome information. We definitely can't wait for people to hear it. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. You both are amazing. And congrats on your graduation. It's a huge, huge big kudos to you.
Oh, more excited than you can know.
Thank you. Well, we'll see you at hopefully the next Disrupt HR event.
You will. Yeah.
All right, that was a really fun episode, Joe. I know we got the privilege of getting to hear Eileen speak. We'll have the video in the description, but overall, just I feel like there's always so much to learn from her. We got to learn about business, HR, starting your own firm. Like I feel like there's just so many different topics we got to talk about, and time really just flew by.
Yeah, she was great. We always talk about IO, and it was cool to hear HR from an MBA perspective, even though we've talked about MBAs before, to hear about her like personal experience and how that adapted to her now professional career was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think the timing of this is perfect in terms of we're like now we're starting the new chapter of our show and getting her on here to kind of talk about topics and touch on a lot of the IO topics. Like we even got into flow theory for a second and mindfulness and topics that we've talked about in an IO context, but getting to do it in a business context. Like I thought that was a really cool thing for us to do too. You know.
Yeah, no, I hope you guys like the new format, and definitely give us your ideas or and comments on like what you guys like and what you don't like, and what we like to see more of. But thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you in 2 weeks this time.
See you guys in 2 weeks. Got a good ring to it.